There have been numerous studies where we've seen that there is emptying number of biases against women entrepreneurs, and if we have more women funders, we are able to break these barriers and glass ceilings.
What kind of barriers have you come across till now, or in the studies, what are the sort of barriers that are listed?
There are a lot of underlying layers of unconscious bias. This overconfidence of males need not necessarily be matched with the overconfidence of females, right? And here you're probably trying to change their natural traits and make them what they are not.
Very few organizations have put systems in place which will allow a woman to go through her motherhood journey and still be able to excel at the corporate workplace, and that can be done.
Yeah.
It's not like it can't be done if
Completely,
you simply rethink the workplace.
Yeah. Even something as simple as a car testing dummy that you have is actually a male dummy. And again, studies have shown that females have faced higher number of accidents, face higher risk because they are not even tested. A lot of factories, right, don't have a women's washroom, right? That itself is a huge deterrent for women workers and laborers to join that organization.
Welcome to the Untitled Show. Today we have with us Shruti Deora, who's a partner at Intellicap. She's also the co-founder of Abhiyan Wealth. Shruti is actively working towards bridging the gender divide in the financial space and also the corporate world in general. She's also actively working towards financial inclusion. She's also a guest lecturer at IIM Kozhikode. So we're very happy to have you, Shruti, on the show.
Thank you for having me, Bhavna. Lovely to be here.
Great, lovely. So let's dive right in. Tell us more about your work at Intellicap.
Sure. So Intellicap is an impact advisory firm which is a part of Avishkar Group, which is a 20+ year old organization that focus on impact investing. And so as a part of Avishkar Group, we have Intellicap, which is the impact advisory wing. We also have Avishkar Capital, which is looking at the impact investing space. We also have Arohan Microfinance, which is one of the largest NBFCs in India. And we have Ashwa Finance, which looks at SME lending as well. So Intellicap specifically focuses on the consulting and the advisory aspects of the entire sustainability space, and we work across sustainable development goals ranging from education, healthcare, climate, agriculture, energy, gender, livelihood, wash, nutrition. So the entire gamut of sustainable development goals is what we cover. The goal is for us to look at solutions that can impact people and planet in a positive way, and for us to be able to serve the last 3 billion underserved population of the world. So we work across Asia and Africa and almost like 70+ countries. And I primarily focus on the work at the intersection of climate, gender, and financial inclusion.
Oh, lovely. So you said that you are working at the intersection of gender, finance, and climate. How is it that these three come together, and how is it that you're working at the intersection of these three very different domains?
Correct. So let me explain this with an example. What I'm specifically looking at, so one of the projects that we worked on was looking at increasing women in leadership positions who are specifically focused on climate and green finance, right? And by this, I mean that it can be the entire spectrum of sustainability, right? And we have like a lot of climate finance coming into the developing countries, and there's a lot of focus on climate finance, right? But the presence of women leadership across these roles, whether it is a development finance institution, whether it is a any regular financial institution, whether it is a PVC firm, we have like very, very low visibility and presence of women in leadership positions, which also then impacts the finance flow to women entrepreneurs. And what we try to do is work with a set of women entrepreneurs who were creating solutions from a sustainability perspective. So they were creating solutions on energy efficiency, or they are looking at looking at the entire sustainability aspect of the textile sector. So these are a lot of women entrepreneurs, and we see a lot of women entrepreneurs focusing on circular, sustainability, climate focused solutions. But because we don't have enough women investors as lenders, as capital providers, women entrepreneurs face a huge bias and challenge in terms of accessing that capital as well. So what we worked on is, first shortlisting some of these very interesting solutions, and then also making them meet relevant investors who were looking at, climate sustainability as a key component in their overall portfolio. So that's what we're focusing on as one of our flagship projects. Apart from that, just in general, we also are looking at how we can have more women across, say, the banking sector. So currently, in the banking sector, overall, we have about 25% women, but at a leadership position, it's still around 15 to 17%. And if we look at a PVC sector, right, that space is even more like we find hardly any women partners or leaders who can actually influence where the capital flows. And again, there have been numerous studies where we've seen that there is umpteen number of biases against women entrepreneurs, and if we have more women funders, we are able to break these barriers and glass ceilings. So the idea is to have women in decision making roles who can influence where this finance flows, and which then translates to better solutions on the ground, having more women as entrepreneurs in the entire value chain as well, and then obviously as the end beneficiary.
Right. So you spoke about the barriers that a lot of women entrepreneurs face, especially when it comes to fundraising, or how they are looked at by different investors. So what kind of barriers have you come across till now, or in the studies, what are the sort of barriers that are listed? And from your experience and of working with so many women, talking to them, what is it that you see that comes up often?
Yeah, so I think, see, a lot of the barriers, right, because there is now, everyone is aware of this to a certain extent, which also means a lot of people are politically correct. So we also always talk about, DI policies being in place, or this policy of being focusing on meritocracy, right? But at the same time, we see there are a lot of underlying layers of unconscious bias, which are there across, like, a lot of organizations, and we might just feel that we are just merit focused, right? So for example, we looked at the entire life cycle of investing, right, from hiring and recruitment of employees in your organization, to how we are promoting, how we are doing the appraisal, and finally, like, who is getting the money and the funding, and then how we are looking at the investee companies as well. So we looked at multiple different processes and policies. So while a lot of these firms had the policies in place, the implementation was where we saw was a huge gap and challenge because of the unconscious biases.
So for example, आपने बोला कि बहुत सारे biases होते हैं which are unconscious biases.
Correct.
People don't even realize
Right.
that they are doing something
Right.
because सामने वाला एक महिला है, एक लड़की है, whatever.
Yeah.
So what kind of unconscious biases, if you could go into sort of specifics,
Sure.
or maybe give an example?
Yes. So we did this workshop with a set of fund managers, and we saw that simple things like recruitment, right? We might just say कि हमने JD निकाला है, and that is based on merit, right? But there might be a lot of words, and there is, say, an AI tool that we kind of also deployed when we did this exercise. We asked all the fund managers in the room, about 30 to 40 of them, to get their JDs, and we put this in an AI tool to see how many words of the JD itself were very masculine focused, talked about as them as an individual contributor versus a team player, or talked about them achieving aggressive targets or being in a very competitive environment, versus if you look at a lot of these feminine traits of collaboration, teamwork, working together, I think these parts were not as much focused, which also actually deterred a lot of women from just applying to those roles. So, this is something
Right.
that we don't even realize in how we are wording, say, a JD, how we are putting out the application to call for more women, or just call for more candidates. So I think looking at every small aspect is very, very important. Another example, so there's a very famous book which talks about a woman entrepreneur who had created a product on a better quality of breast pump, which was giving
Better output.
Yeah,
and-
better, which was more comfortable. And here, when she went to pitch this to investors, in the US, they were actually just playing with that instrument and making fun of it, saying there are enough in the market, why do you need another one? Whereas this was like a very, very well identified gap where women weren't finding good quality breast pumps. But because the entire, say the VC folks who were evaluating it were completely male dominated, and it was not like a lived or a personal experience for them, they didn't even realize the
That there
importance
is
of
a
the product.
problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think such cases, and again, they might have just brushed it off saying, oh, there's no market or there's no demand, and said that, okay, we want to just focus on meritocracy and business case, right? But these are unconscious biases because of not having those lived experiences. You kind of tend to overlook,
Right.
Even another very good example is, say, in case of a promotion and appraisal, we often kind of talk about how we are completely focused on, say, being very logical and objective, right? And often, there are enough books and literatures which talk about a woman needs to kind of step up and ask for that raise or ask for that promotion, right? Whereas I have nothing against it and I completely support that. I also feel that, this is a very masculine trait where you kind of talk about
Sure.
so I think, see, during promotions and appraisals, we often tell that women should kind of ask for that raise or ask for that promotion, right? And you should be very aggressive and kind of show what you've done, talk about what you've done a lot more. It might not be the regular feminine trait, and we might, in that case, just be copying the masculine traits, which are accepted norm in the industry because males have dominated in the leadership position for the last few centuries, right? And why don't we ever tell, that the males or the men should not overplay what they've done, right? And again, there is enough evidence to say that even if there's a JD out, women, only if they comply 100% or more, apply for
Totally,
it.
absolutely.
Versus a male, even if they comply, like say 40-50%, they'll go ahead and apply
Yeah.
for it, right? So this overconfidence of males need not necessarily be matched with the overconfidence of females, right? And here you're probably trying to change their natural traits and make them what they are not, whereas you could literally be doing the opposite.
Absolutely. And a trait that is actually a good trait we might
Yes.
be wanting to
Yeah.
change,
So, yeah.
then finally creating an even more toxic workplace.
Correct.
Also, just to add to it, we've seen that most workplaces, even till now, are designed keeping in mind a 40-year-old American man in
Correct.
mind.
Correct.
And it's high time that this starts changing,
Yes.
because while it was good that we moved to a hybrid workplace, in a lot of organizations it's still not there.
Yeah.
And think about a woman who's asked to come after a 6-month maternity break, after the child is just 6 months old, and she is constantly worrying about
Yeah.
the child. And though sometimes stepping out of that whole zone is important for her also, there's hardly, very few organizations have put systems in place which will allow a woman to go through her motherhood journey and still be able to excel at the corporate workplace, and that can be done.
Yeah.
It's not like it can't be done if
Completely,
you
yeah.
simply rethink the
Yeah,
workplace.
yeah. No, so completely agreed on that, right? Even something as simple as, a car testing dummy that you have is actually a male dummy. And again, studies have shown that females have faced higher number of accidents, face higher risk because they are not even tested
Yeah.
while we are doing the car crash test. Another example is simple, the AC temperatures in our office, right? And what you said
Yes.
on childcare is also very, very important, because what is considered as a reimbursable expense, for example, we are allowed to take reimbursements of dinners and drinks, but a woman who might be staying alone and taking care of a child will not probably get like a reimbursement for childcare that she might have to set up to be able to attend a meeting in the evening for office, right? So how did we decide what is okay and what is not okay is really designed around
Yeah.
a standard archetype of a male body,
Right,
right?
right,
Even
right.
things like, say, having childcare in office, right? Again, law mandates that we have a childcare in office for employees where we have more than 50 employees. But so many organizations have not implemented that,
Yeah.
right? But you will in the same organization find a TT table, a foosball
Yeah,
table.
yeah.
So how much does a space for a childcare or even like a breast pumping room or a mother and childcare room take versus say an entire TT table and a sports area, right?
Right,
So again,
right,
the
right.
idea is to be more aware and then kind of address these issues in a
Smaller
more conscious
issues.
manner, which enables you to create an environment which is more friendly to women and working mothers returning back from maternity as well.
Hmm. And they say that these office spaces are designed the way they are because
Yes.
maybe 70% of their workforce
Correct.
is
Correct.
men, so they design it around that.
Yes.
But they don't think that the 70% of
Yeah.
workforce is men and 30% of it
Yeah,
is women,
yeah.
only because your space is not designed to meet the
Correct.
comforts
But
of
yes,
a
Bhavna,
woman.
so this is one aspect, right? Like even if you have, and a lot of factories, right, that don't have a women's washroom, right? That itself is a huge deterrent for women workers and laborers to join that organization. They have to probably not go to the washroom the entire day, right? Girls are dropping out of schools because a lot of public schools might not have functional women washrooms, right? And that's where we see the highest dropout as well. See, I think a lot of these things are getting addressed at a very basic level, and I am very hopeful and positive of the changes being made, but we still have a long way to go. And a lot of organizations, even if we have 50% workforce right now at this entry level, right, a lot of organizations have been able to achieve that. A lot of educational institutions have been able to get that gender balance as well, and that's why we see 50-40% at the entry level. But as we go up higher, it's really almost like in single digits for most industries.
Great. Okay, so now let's dive into your own career trajectory. You started as a CA, you cleared your CA examination in the first attempt, which is a big dream for so many CA aspirants, and that's something that's incredible. So, would you just throw some light on that journey of yours and maybe
Sure.
what helped you at that time? What do you think
Yeah.
helped you?
So I think I was extremely focused on studies, and I was a very disciplined and a consistent person, so to say, right? So I would have, like, my room walls will be filled with timetables. Like I would really map my entire curriculum divided by like month, week, and day, and have like I'm going to cover so much today, and have this 8 to 10 hours of study schedule on a regular basis.
And follow that.
Yes.
A lot of people create it,
So
but
I
don't
think
follow.
the idea is to be as realistic as possible. Honestly, I'd admit I would kind of overshoot it a little bit, and probably meet 80 to 90% of it, right? But I think I also had this very interesting quote that I had put up on my study table saying, "Aim for the stars. Even if you fall short, you land on the moon," right? And that's what I would follow, because see, if you just aim for exactly what you think you can do, you might then
Yeah.
also not achieve that thing. Okay, I've done so much, right? So I think aim a little bit like a stretch goal for yourself, and then whatever you kind of achieve is also good enough for you to kind of make your meet your
Right.
meet your like timetable and what you need to do to be thorough with the concept. So I think one is definitely having that discipline and consistency in your study schedule. Second, I would also say what helped me a lot was just understanding the concepts really well. So I would never be a person who would just like rote learn something, right? If I'm not understanding it, it doesn't work for
Yeah.
me. So I would look at different applications as much as possible, and also discuss it a lot with my friends, colleagues, because we, as a part of CA articleship, we also were working when we were giving the exams. So we had a lot of practical application also, in some sense imbibed into our learning journey. Third, I would say is very, very important is just to build your tribe. And I think just having a lot of friends who are also, going through a similar journey.
phase.
So I had a lot of friends who were studying CA at that point of time. In fact, 90% of my circle was doing CA. And I think that really helped a lot, because it becomes a very, very difficult and scary journey at some points of time. And I think that's when your friends your friends are there to have that conversation, pull you back up, also kind of motivate you. If you have like a doubt at any point of time, you can just call them up and have like a conversation, understand it more deeply. I think that really helps. So I think those things I would say helped a lot.
And you would have been like a topper, or maybe very good at studies and academics throughout your schooling. So what happens is often when we are very good at academics, people think that you will take PCM, and the
Yes.
whole science thing is
Yes.
always there with the Indian
Yes.
in the
Yes.
Indian society
Correct.
and the Indian
Correct.
education system
Correct.
that we have. So did that happen with you, and how come you chose
Yes,
commerce
I think
then?
you've touched a nerve there. Yeah, so I think I got like I got a really good grade in my 10th standard, and I could have literally got into any of the top science colleges. And a lot of people around me, very close relatives, were like trying to get me to take PCM. But I was very sure that I wasn't interested in science at all as a career option, right? Because I think chemistry wasn't something that interested me at all. I used to like physics and maths, but I think chemistry and biology, again, biology is something I used to like, but I didn't want to be a doctor. So I think just having that clarity of what you don't want to do also helps a lot. So that kind of left me with two other major options, which was arts and commerce. And I felt that commerce would give me a lot more opportunities in terms of, say, just understanding the overall aspects of business, taxation, and being able to kind of, if I want to do something on my own. Whereas art was also a good close competitor, because I really enjoyed some of the subjects like economics and political science. But I think I chose commerce because I felt it had more practical application and business application as well. So I think
So
yes.
did you receive a pushback at that time when you were?
I did. But I think that was also a period between, I think, just when your results are declared, 10th standard results are declared, and you're applying for your college admissions. So I think it was a period of, back and forth between the two. And it was more about negotiation rather than, because I had like decided that I'm not doing science, right? So I think if you are very sure of what you don't want to do, and you have conviction in that, you will be able to find a way and get everyone else to kind of align with that. And it might be a struggle of probably 15-20 days, 1 month of that period when you're not applying for colleges. But yeah, after you have done, you've applied to the college, you've got an admission, I think the chapter closes. So
Yeah, but you're
yes.
fortunate enough that you
Yes.
had that clarity at 10th standard, which many don't.
Yes.
And they still land up somewhere where they're
Yes.
supposed to be, and
Yes.
there's destiny
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
plays a role for sure. But there's also grit and determination and perseverance
Correct.
that has to happen if you aim for something. So you're also a guest lecturer at IIM Kohikode. So what is it that you teach there?
So what I focus on is actually intersecting with the work I do completely in some sense. I focus a lot on strategic consulting, so the aspects of, say, project management, stakeholder engagement, also impact, advisory a lot. So I focused and, worked on, so I focused and taken sessions on how we can, say, bridge the wealth divide in the country, right? Also the work that I do with Abhiyan Wealth, I've taken a lot of personal finance workshops, and working on the financial literacy overall for the country is very important. So I do cover aspects from consulting, impact, and finance, and looking at it from a practical perspective. So trying to make it as industry focused as possible, with real life examples, projects that I've been a part of, which kind of also gives them that exposure of what they can really expect when they kind of move into the industry or corporate roles.
So, having worked with or having taught at IIM Kohikode, what do you see as some of the glaring skill gaps that are still there? Or if you see the curriculum of an MBA college right now, what do you think should absolutely be there, which is right now hardly being taught at
Yeah.
colleges?
So I think two, three different things. One is the focus on entrepreneurship, right? I've said this enough number of times to every student or a young candidate that I meet, is not to kind of study and do an IIM just for getting a job, right? Because that's a very narrow focus, and for you to be able to kind of, and entrepreneurship does not necessarily mean that you start your own organization alone, right? Even within large organizations, we see there is enough space for you to develop new solutions, new product lines, new services, and that itself can be like an entrepreneur journey that you take. So the idea is to not just kind of study or go through your curriculum to land up that next job, but to look at broader range of skills and capabilities that you're developing as a part of your entire curriculum. So I think the skill gaps that I see right now, one would definitely be including the practical aspects of everything that we are learning in our curriculums. And while we have a lot of case studies, I think just live projects or engaging with the industry will make a huge lot of difference, because often we are doing like 4 case studies, 5 case studies a day or in a week, and I think we're still taking like a very theoretical approach to that, versus when we actually get out in the industry, we realize that it is very, very different from what we've understood or thought it to be. So I think one is understanding the practical aspects. Second would be focus on entrepreneurship. Third, I would also be saying that a focus on sustainability with profitability. But beyond that, everything is focused more on just profitability, right? And when we're talking about sustainability, how can we create sustainable solutions for people, as an organization culture, but also for the planet, right? As simple as if you're a part of textile industry, are you looking at circularity aspects of it? Are you looking at the waste that is being generated? How are we going to take that back and not create additional dump yards, for example, right? Lastly, I would also say focus on extracurricular activities, and I think most educational organizations do give you that opportunity, but often students take it as a way to get a CV point in their resumes, but I feel that actually gives you a lot of intangible soft skills. So I was a part of student council in my college days. We were looking at 30 different student bodies, managing their budgets, working with the faculty members, the administration, and I think that was a real life experience of being able to negotiate, being able to network, being able to get work done, and a lot of these soft skills are very, very important for you to be successful in any role that you take up. So yeah.